Welcome. In this video, we're going to take a look at the ANY.RUN platform, which is an interactive malware hunting service. And in particular, I wanted to just show everyone how I generally use this platform, particularly helpful when it comes to triaging unknown binaries that I discover in the wild. If you're not familiar with ANY.RUN, it is available at ANY.RUN. They have the primary service, which is what we're going to focus on today, but there's a lot of other great resources here. For example, the tracker is one that allows you to look at known malware families that are in their submission rate, as well as the top families that they're tracking over time. There are the blog, which is going to have a lot of great write-ups and some detailed analysis as well. So some really good resources here. Now, in terms of pricing, I think that's always something that's important to understand. There is the sandbox, which is what we're going to be using here. And there are a couple of tiers. So ANY.RUN offers a freemium model for non-commercial use. That's what we're using today. That's generally what I use. And you'll see all of the capabilities that are available to you. You will need a business email address to get started. You then can upgrade to Hunter or Enterprise if you're working in an organization that might be considering this as a platform. And you can see again all of the different options that are available to you. Quite extensive and something that you can again check out. But for my purposes, I'm almost always using the free version, the free tier, because that suits what I'm looking for quite well. Now, for today's sample, I found this binary a couple of days ago and uploaded it to the platform. And we're going to upload it again today. And I'm going to do that for a couple of different reasons. One is so that we can see the real-time analysis and sort of pick apart some interesting aspects to it. And then two, we can actually rely upon some of those previous sandbox runs to help fill in some gaps. So that's going to serve the purpose there. Before going right to a sandbox, I might do a little bit of initial analysis. As you can see with this sample, Broadcom5.exe, that was actually the original name on the server that I found it. So it's implying that it is a PE file, from the .exe extension, but we can use the file utility to just confirm that. And the only reason that I really want to confirm that is before I upload it to a place like ANY.RUN, I know that it's going to be able to handle the file. Sometimes you download these payloads, they're obfuscated, maybe they're compressed, and there's another stage that's responsible for deobfuscating them. Sometimes the download gets corrupt, or the malware itself is no longer there. And so I oftentimes will use automated means to download these things. I might actually just get raw HTML content because it was a 404 error. In order to get started, we're going to go. That was from the service tab here if you go to the home page. Otherwise, I usually just go to app.any.run, and you can take a look at public reports. I do actually do this quite often just to see what's been uploaded recently. For example, there's this stealer. That's all that they were able to identify with it. Here's an NJ-rat. And all of these tags are actually quite helpful because not only are they going to allow us to maybe more quickly process or kind of triage these public submissions, but that's going to be some key information that we're going to look for as our samples are running. Now, we'll come back to the public reports in just a moment. What we want to do is go to New Analysis, and you have two options here. We have the simple mode and the pro mode, and you'll see that the pro mode, which is where it defaulted to in this case for me, not only will you have the ability to upload a URL, to upload a file or input a URL, but you can change what happens inside the environment essentially. Where does the sample start from? Well, with the free accounts, we're going to be somewhat limited here. What browser opens if it needs to open a browser? Are there any command lines? Execution duration, network configuration, applications that are installed inside of the VM, as well as hotfixes. We also have the operating system, and as you can see, Windows 10 is going to be selected by default, but under the free accounts, you'll also have access to the Windows 7 32-bit and Ubuntu as well. Windows 10 works great though, because a lot of the stuff I discover is PEs. It's Windows executables, so it's designed for the Windows operating system, so that's all I need. In fact, usually when I'm interacting with ANY.RUN, I'm just using the simple mode. Okay, now we can go back to our File Explorer, grab our sample, we can drop it in. Our operating system's already chosen, and we can run a public analysis. Now, another caveat with the free tier, they made it pretty obvious there with the run public analysis. When you're using the free tier, everything that you upload will be publicly available. It's going to show up under that public reports. So others can access the sample that you uploaded, as well as the threat actor can monitor. So just be aware of that. Something that I really like about the platform is that you're going to start to get data immediately. We have network activity coming in real time. We have process activity coming in real time. We're getting tagging coming in real time. And so this is incredibly helpful because you don't have to wait for the sandbox to run in order to see and observe and to start doing your analysis. It's there immediately. Now, this sample happens to be quite noisy, both on the network and on the host. So there's a lot going on here. This doesn't always happen. I chose this sample, though, because one, I came across it recently, and two, it's quite noisy. So it makes for a great demonstration. Now, before I get too far, I want to add some time. So up in the upper right-hand corner here, you can add time to your analysis. And I'm just going to click it until it tells me that I can't. I think the maximum we're going to get is about 5 minutes. A minute of initial execution time. I just added 4 minutes more. If at some point you want to discard the run, you just hit stop, and that'll terminate everything as is and provide you with a report based off of the data that was collected during execution. Now, just going through some of this information, I don't want to overlook the fact that you do have a full interactive desktop session here. We can interact with anything that pops up. Sometimes you will get, Trojanized things, game hacks and cracks and others that it might be interesting to see that as part of the UI. A lot of times, though, there's just nothing going on here. There's really nothing to observe. On occasion, when I find samples in the wild, for example, before I recorded this, I found an executable that had a couple of DLLs all in the same host. When I grabbed the executable, it complained then about not having those DLLs. So I'd have to grab those DLLs in order to get a full and proper execution. So it was good to see those error messages, because then that helped me to understand better the context. Now, when it comes to initial triage, there is a number of things that we can look at. One area that I oftentimes will go is to the threats tab, because the threats tab is going to be generated from network activity using Suricata. And you'll see, just zoom this in a little bit, that we have not only alerts that we can view under our free account, but there are some pro signatures that are also available. And so we can't see those unless we upgrade, but likely those are just going to be higher fidelity signatures. We still can gain a pretty good insight into what's happening. Now, scrolling through some of these alerts, you'll see executable download from dotted quad, executable downloaded from dotted quad, discord.com and TLS SNI, DNS lookup for discordapp.com. We have a suspicious XYZ domain, and so redirect to Discord attachment. Also looks like this is no doubt a loader, and that this initial binary is trying to download and install a bunch of different files. The alerts really would point and indicate to that, as well as just how noisy everything's been. We can look at the HTTP requests, though, and you'll see we have a number of different HTTP requests for different executables. Channel5.exe, file1.exe, windows.exe, and so forth and so on. And so certainly this looks like it's trying to download any number of different malware or other files that it's been purposed to download. Now, with a lot of these, channel5.exe, for example, we can look immediately at the response. And what I want to see here, let's scroll down a little bit and see if we have any results. No, we don't. We'll go and look at a previous execution to see the content type. What I'm looking for is when an executable is actually downloaded, it's going to be bright red. In this case, we've got a 301 byte response, and it's in HTML. And you probably can guess what this HTML is going to tell us, but we can see it here in its full detail in just a moment. We've got a 404 not found. And that happens often enough. Usually when I come across something that's new, that's in the wild, that it's not been uploaded to VirusTotal, I get it in the sandbox right away so that if it's relying on infrastructure across the internet, it can get out there and make those requests and I can get it captured. But there is often times where it's no longer active, or maybe there's just something that is preventing it from making the request. Maybe it's geofenced or something. So here we can see in the preview that, yeah, this in fact was a 404, so that host wasn't there. So we have a bit of a dead end when it comes to that particular payload, unless we can rely on previous executions, which we can in this case. We can continue to explore. Maybe we'll see some other HTTP requests. For example, api.check-data.xyz. This looks pretty interesting just because it is a fairly odd-looking URL, check-data.xyz. In the context of all this malware, certainly this is something that is probably malicious in nature. And here you can see the actual pattern. It's nothing that's human recognizable, but we might be able to take this particular request, and we can go over to our threats tab, and maybe there's some different alerts that would correlate. Well, we certainly have an alert for a suspicious TLD. That's kind of broad, right? That's just saying, hey, .xyz TLD, that's suspicious. But then below that, so thinking about this in sort of a chronological fashion, if we look at the adware for this particular adware family, and we look at the HTTP data, you'll see, oh yeah, there is definitely an IDS alert for that specific request. Okay, we're still just triage, right? I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. I took an unknown binary and I'm trying to collect as much information as I can about it in as short a time as possible. And we've really already done that, right? We've already identified that it's a loader, and all this other activity then is not only from the initial sample itself, but all of the stuff that it's trying to download. And so this can get quite overwhelming, and that now we need to potentially look at some of these individual samples to understand what it's dropping if we care. We have other DNS requests. We can scroll through these to see if there's anything else that stands out. I believe there was a couple of hosts. For example, this one, the IP address was not found, so there wasn't a DNS record set up for it, but it might be a host that's worth pulling from our analysis here, doing a little investigation, doing a little research on, seeing what else we can come up with. Very similar with the connections tab. Right? We're looking at HTTP requests, but there might be some raw connections in here that are worth investigating. And let's just see if anything stands out here. Because if it did, and I'm just looking at the domain, okay, service-domain.xyz, and you can look at the actual raw traffic. Now, keep in mind that, for example, the service-domain.xyz, this is a port 443, so likely this is establishing a TLS session. And if we look at this raw content, then this is probably the establishment of that TLS session. So there may not be a lot of value in looking at that raw communication, but sometimes you will find that the malware is communicating to hosts, to C2, and it's not using HTTP. It is using raw TCP or some other protocol that might be worth looking at. If that is the case, and there's an IDS alert for it, you'll see it here. Now, switching gears, talked a little bit about tags already. You'll see that as the execution continued and then eventually wrapped up, any different tags are all going to be populated up above. And so this is usually the first place I'm looking, in addition to the threats tab as the execution's unfolding, because if the platform is aware of any specific families or other behaviors, they're going to show up here. And not only will they show up here, but for example, this last tag, if it's related to process activity, then we're going to find, as we scroll through all this process activity, we're going to find that tag associated with the process. All right, so here isn't the one I was looking for, but you can see it was this install.exe that had the XOR-URL. And in particular, it'll have this CFG option. And if you click on that, what ANY.RUN is telling you is that it found a bunch of XOR encoded or XOR encrypted URLs, and here they all are. And so this might be a wealth of information here in terms of understanding more, because we didn't see, we saw this API check data, but we didn't see all of these emit through the different network behaviors. There might be behavior here that just didn't have time to execute, or it wasn't configured to. that now we could extract and dig a little bit deeper to figure out what's going on. We can continue to scroll, and maybe towards the end here we'll find there's another XOR URL. It might be similar, it might be different. It'd be worth taking a peek at. And there we go. So there's finally the process that had the tag of that particular malware family. So now you can click on the process and you'll be able to understand where did the detection came from. So in this case, ANY.RUN was able to correlate between the process activity and the network activity because it's telling us that Suricata actually is the reason that detection was made. And then you just have other summary information about the process, the command line, and even more information if you'd like to drill down kind of further into what's happening here or get more of a high-level view. So this is just another way to pivot into all of that process activity. Okay, ANY.RUN also has malware configuration extraction. That's also something that not every sandbox or threat intelligence platform will provide. You've already seen some of that malware configuration extraction, and in this case, that's all it is the XOR URL. But there was 3 instances of it, and now we can very quickly pivot through the process IDs, the names, and see the results. And it looks like just at a kind of a surface level glance here, all of it was the same data. So with something that's noisy like this, especially something that's dropping, downloading, and distributing a lot of different malware, or what appears to be a lot of different malware, we could have multiple different malware family config extractions and a lot of interesting information here. Okay, we have IOC that will help you to summarize the different indicators that were recovered through the execution. This just summarizes those, file hashes and DNS requests and different connections, as well as HTTP requests. So something to help just sort of, again, summarize. And with something that's noisy like this, that can be really helpful. Some things you do have to do some manual investigation. For example, we have different process events here, such as the schedule tasks. Schedule tasks could be a good indication of persistence. And that's going to tell you then not only that something along the line here, this execution chain is trying to persist, but if we look at the command line, it's going to show you like the location. And so you're going to be able to derive also some helpful host-based indicators here. Last thing in this view is we've got the graph. And this just helps to summarize the graph. Again, this was a pretty busy sample, so it might take a little bit of effort to navigate this, but you're able to see all of the activity that occurred and where ANY.RUN identified significant events. So this can be another way, especially with malware that are samples that aren't quite so busy, to more quickly digest what's happened. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video, what happens if we're getting a lot of payloads or connections that just aren't able to happen, payloads that it can't download, connections that it's not able to make. Well, we can grab easily the hash of the file just by clicking on the 2 little boxes here, copying that into the clipboard. And if we go to public reports, what we can do now is we can search for other executions. Okay, and that is something that I will oftentimes do to first see if the sample I've uncovered or discovered has been submitted, because if it hasn't, well, that's interesting to me. I'd like to be able to get that out to the community to be able to defend against it. But in a context like this, where it has actually already been uploaded, well, let's go back in time to this first submission, and we'll be able to look at all of the same data. Now, this one, you'll notice the tagging is a little bit different. We have more malware families such as Luma and Private Loader and CryptBot, because if you look down at the HTTP request tab, these files, channel 5, file 1, right, a lot of the same files that we saw in our analysis, now we have executables. It's tagged as an executable because it was able to identify the response as an executable file. And so this can help us now to go back and fill in some of those gaps, because we can download this, we can submit this for specific analysis. We can very quickly pivot to VirusTotal. And you'll see that this sample here, one of the first ones, was in fact Private Loader. And that helps to confirm then the type of capability that we're dealing with. And if you're not familiar, for example, with something like Private Loader, well, then you can pivot into and look at the different trackers that ANY.RUN provides. So you can see here that we have a tracker for Private Loader. So let's open that up. And now you have a description and some IOCs, different global ranks. And so it can just help you to start to begin to perform your understanding and that further assessment of the different malware families that you uncover. It might also help, like for example, you see this convention in their API. Well, maybe if you see traffic like that and you don't have any context because it isn't identified, well, now you know that maybe this is a pattern that Private Loader is using, at least right now, and that can help you identify it when you come across it in the future. Okay, you can, as you saw, you can download those executables directly from ANY.RUN, or you can grab the PCAP. And with the PCAP now, you can extract all of those. We have better tagging here because there was more activity because a lot of these files were still active, which means then as we go through the process activity here, we're also going to be able to identify, right, there's one of those tags. Let's close that. And there's Luma Stealer. There's CryptBot. But again, there's a lot of activity here. So in this case, going from an unknown binary to being able to identify that it is certainly a loader, it is very active in hitting a number of hosts, although it seems fairly consistent in the hosts that it's interacting with, and then getting a sense of what type of malware it's downloading. We've gone from unknown to having quite a bit of information at our fingertips and the ability to explore a lot of this information just right here in the UI. So if you're ready to give ANY.RUN a try, you got a couple of options here to really easily get started. Go back to the home page. You can click on trial. This will give you the opportunity to get a 14-day full enterprise access. So that's sort of everything that the platform has to offer. You can also create your individual account. And I find probably the easiest way to do that is just go back to the service tab here where all that analysis that we were doing earlier was taking place. I've signed out, so now you can sign in. And here you go. Instead of signing in, choose the sign up tab. Enter your name, your business email, your password. Check the boxes here and click sign up. You'll go through the verification process and you'll be accessing the platform in no time. So hope you enjoyed the video and learning more about the ANY.RUN platform. Again, it's something that I use on a pretty much daily basis for my personal reverse engineering malware analysis work. If you have any comments, please feel free to leave those in the video. I hope to hear from you. Hope you enjoyed the video. And until the next one, keep exploring.